Got my master's out of Newman University in 2009. Been in the mental health field off and on for 25 years. Like you said, owner and operator of Adult Youth Services. We provide several types of court ordered classes. So that's about it. That's pretty much the segue right there.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we have Brittany Jenkins, who's one of our wonderful MSW students, NLC, BS in Human Services, Notary Public, and a Colorado educator with a substitute license. Brittany, would you like to say a few words about yourself, please?
Sure. So I am a Southern native of Bradenton, Florida. I now live in Fountain, Colorado. I'm a lifelong learner. I started my journey with my associate's degree in general studies. After that, I got my bachelor's in human services with an emphasis on nonprofit management. And now I'm in my second year of the master's program at CSU Pueblo. I'm dually enrolled at Seven Cedars live and online training um, on a Health Corps Colorado scholarship for addiction counseling. I'm completing my practicum experience with Mary at Adult Youth Services, and we specialize in substance use disorders. I'm a member of the National Association of Black Social Workers and have most recently been nominated as the Vice President of CSU Pueblo's Student Social Work Association. Um, Overall, I'm a mom, a sister, an educator, a mentor, advocate, friend, but most importantly, I'm a strong Black woman that's committed to the journey and work of becoming a global change agent. So hello, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we have Mr. Melvin Greer, LCSW. He is someone I would consider a good friend of mine and also provides supervision for me. And welcome, Mel. You want to give a little bit about yourself to everyone?
Sure. Name is Melvin Greer. I'm a Black social worker, have been one for 45 years. I only started using that moniker of being a Black social worker because I've become aware that it's very significant to say that because I think there's so few of us. But I graduated from DU. I have a master's in public administration as well as in social work. I've been doing social work for 45 years. I'm currently in private practice. I have, I left the Department of Corrections December the 1st. And if you want to see racism at its worst, check out the prison system. It's terrible. So, I am also a child and family investigator or CFI, and I do a lot of other things just to keep my interest up, That's, yeah, I think, as we go along, you'll discover some more things. So that's it.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all of you being here so much. I'm really looking forward to the conversations we're going to have. Mary put together a slide that we're going to be viewing along with our conversation tonight. And by the way, my name is Calico Vargas. I am a visiting assistant professor and the MSW field coordinator for CSUP. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. So these are some really important issues that we're talking about tonight and have been very important issues for a very long time. But I was wondering, out of the three of you, who would like to get us started about the topic of Black fatigue?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I think the Black fatigue is I think it's an experience that we go through each and every day, regardless of how anybody feel. Most of the time is stuff that is kind of subtle is just somewhat subtle. It's not always things that you're looking for. It's just living through your everyday life.
Thank you.
So, the reason I hesitated because so many things came to mind about Black fatigue, but what I have seen with Black fatigue has a lot to do with PTSD and stress. That's how I would categorize that. I think in these times, but throughout being Black, um, it has an impact on one's psychological and physical being and well-being. And hopefully we'll get to talk more about that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with both. I think Black fatigue is a lived experience that, like what Miss Mary said, we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it just gets to a point where living your normal daily life, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And so that's where the fatigue comes in. It's not so much that we, how do I put it? It's not so much that we don't enjoy being Black. We're very proud to be Black, but we are just tired of all the systemic issues that factor in and marginalize and oppress us on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for that. That's a great segue into the next slide, actually. Let's talk about the analogy of the tree and systemic racism. Who wants to start with the everyday manifestations in the description of the branches and the leaves?
Well, I'd like to start not at the branch. I think we probably need to go from the roots up, because with the roots, that's the part that it gets its nourishment from and feeds into the tree as itself. Mm-hmm. So when we are looking at the root system, the colonialism, the white supremacy, the capitalism, the patriarchy, the imperialism, all of that is fed. These are the nutrients that goes up through the tree, the trunk, and to the branches. And once you start taking a look at the systems of the domination or the roots, then you can kind of unpack and see where all of this is coming from. Because these are, has been the mark of the United States since its inception. And so it hasn't really changed. It just kind of went more underground, but the colonialism, the white supremacy, the superior, everything runs off of money, the capitalism as itself, patriarchy, the males. So I don't know, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on that? Because that's why I see from the roots, the nutrients goes up through the tree.
Yeah, I would have to agree. It kind of helps everything else manifest and come to fruition, right? And so then you start to see it play out in the little things, the subliminal messages. You see it play out in the healthcare system. You see it play out in the school system. Like Mel was alluded to earlier, the prison system. You see it everywhere, but it starts at the root, at the foundation of what America was even built on.
So I'm seeing the next part of that being the institutional ideologies and the structures. And I mean, that's probably something we have a little bit more, I don't know, would you say control over than we do the roots that have already kind of been planted and foundational. How do we go about making this system better, different?
Well, in the root system itself, it nourished this trunk, and that establishes the laws. The laws in itself is coming out of the capitalism, the colonialism, and the white supremacy. And so if you're moving up through the tree, the ideologies, okay, so now you have to start looking more into those institutional ideologies. How are we going to challenge that? Normally we vote people in and part of to help establish systems as it is, but when we are looking at what the policies. That's what we have to do. And it starts at the ground level. It doesn't always start at the big top. It always starts in your communities, your cities and stuff like that. So when they start implementing policies that's locally, that's the part where we have to get involved in and start doing things there as they move up and transition up. That's how I see it.
So, when I look at systemic racism, and I agree with what Mary was talking about. I have to first be reminded that um, what are we talking about? And you were asking the question, well, how do you fix that? What we're talking about is power, those who have and those who don't have power. And it started, that root system, if you will, it's an oppression, the disadvantage, being oppressed by those certain social groups who designate or say, well, those people are inferior to us. In other words, power equates to economic power.
Mhm.
That's where you have to begin with, because the disparity comes when those who are in power control everything else. That's why when Martin Luther King, said, okay, we'll hit him, and we won't, ride the bus. We won't do that. After a year, people say, geez, they're hitting us in the pocket because money talks. And that's where you have to begin to look at systemic racism. If I believe that you're inferior, and I begin to treat you like that, then I think that you don't deserve the same things that I do. I'm sorry, that was a little convoluted, but anyway, hopefully you'll get my point.
So in terms of how do we then take some of that power and redistribute it? If the power is the central issue and the economic portion is what's giving the power, any ideas?
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it starts with first raising awareness, because some people, aren't even aware that they have privilege, or they are aware and they don't want to accept, the idea of having privilege over another. So awareness and education. And then when you ask about redistributing that power, I think that those who have power have to, in a sense, delegate or be open to relinquishing that power to others, like people that look like me, right? So that we can get more Black people, more diverse people in general in positions of power, to change the laws. And but it starts with awareness and education, I think.
I think, and that's moving along with that, I think that's correct, because until you educate, even at the most basic, understanding how okay, I just read someone's thing, so we might have to do a little question and answer, because that kind of caught my eye. I think once we start educating people about how systems work, I think that's the whole thing right here, not just how people, the votes, how laws are made, how all of these things are done. I think that's a part of it too, coming back down to I don't know, like American history or civics, teaching civics again, and letting people know how power is done, how bills are made, how it's moved up through the system.
Yes, that's great. And that was a comment in the chat as well, that the nutrients and the things that you're putting into the roots are what's going to push up through the tree. Great. Do you guys want to hit at all on the everyday manifestations?
Well, the everyday aggressions and stuff, I think we are seeing it play out on TV right now. Every day, it's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't see something, some type of racial profiling, um, physical aggressions, all of that is definitely being played out on TV. Each day you turn on, something is always going on. And I think too, with so much news being generated, I think it still comes back to the educational piece. I think someone needs to start, okay, this is not a good way of doing things. This is not how it should be. But, we have to play kind of the devil's advocate. Okay, this happened. How are we going to fix it? I think we more reactionary instead of really going down into the roots and working it out with the education piece.
Yeah, let me just add to that. As far as the everyday manifestations, I also feel that, we need our white allies to step up and say, hey, this has to stop. At some point, when is enough enough, right? And so if we can have more people who have power and privilege to step up and fight against these powers that be, perhaps we could get somewhere.
That's a good point. Yes.
Well, I think coming back from a social worker perspective, one is three levels of, or three things to look at in terms of racism. And it's not only is it individual, it's cultural and institutionally. So it's a bigger issue than, just looking at the institution. And one of the things that as a Black social worker, that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, and of all these things that impact the people or the clients that we serve. I'm not looking to eradicate, something that we all have biases, but you can't do anything, or what we have found is we can't do anything until, one, we have more economic power. That's what I see when I work as a social worker, is that the disadvantage continue to be disadvantaged because they don't have access that the white person has access to, or on an equal basis. So just coming from that perspective makes what we do as social workers, it makes us try to intervene in each one of those institutions culturally, on those different levels I meant. And so I think on one level, you're right, education is one, but some people don't stop to allow themselves to be educated, because we all have a sense of a different awareness or a different perception. I mean, we know that there are, Blacks that, as long as their needs are met, they're not concerned about everybody else. And also, we have to remember, when we see overt racism, and we could point a finger and say, oh yeah, that's overt. But if you look at the iceberg, there's a lot of stuff up underneath of that is feeding into this racism. And that's the part that's the challenge that we have as social workers, Black social workers, because we don't want to perpetuate the racism, but I think that we do. I think, I remember Mary talking about, her, 6'8", is he, Mary? Your nephew?
Yes,
7
my
foot, yeah.
stepson. My
Yeah, your
stepson.
stepson, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
6'8", and I remember, everybody looks at him and say, geez, he's a, does he play basketball? Not looking at the possibility that he could have been a doctor, or anything
Right.
else. But the first thing you think of, and I think you talked about it, obviously he's doing something else, but we do those type of things. We, stereotype people because that's how we were raised. And so that is not just the education. It's just, when do you point out, when is it racist and when is it not? When is it a cultural thing? When is it a institutional thing? So it's not just the education, is your part, but there's a whole other things that have to go into, dealing with this subject.
I think you bring up a good point because, in social work, we're very person and environment, and we think about the micro, the meso, and the macro and the global levels now. And we're also looking at using systems theory, which runs right in with, what we're talking about here. It's the systems, right? So I think social workers have a lot that they can do because of the training that we have and because of the way that we view the world. I really appreciate
Calico, can you answer some of those questions and answers? People are throwing up stuff. So
thank you. I can see it.
because we had a couple of people, saying some things that could, extend the conversation as well.
Can you guys see what I'm seeing on my screen with the panel, with the chat? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I was talking about a Q&A. Somebody had a question and answer, and then you had some people had some chats that they were sending in some comments.
Okay, so how do you navigate predominantly white organizations when they claim allyship, but those in positions of power have a vast disconnect from the lived experiences of BIPOC and continually undermine change efforts or continually employ inequitable and oppressive practices?
That's good.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, though, is,
The power.
the power. Because, there was an old adage that I'll hire like someone like me. And a lot of people like me were not of our color. It was a lot of people who were white. And so how do you stop that? Well, the difficulty about stopping that is, first of all, you got to point it out. It's like when I was, coming up, had to deal with affirmative action. And you always had that thought that the only reason that you were hired is because of affirmative action. And that is a subtle put down, because that somehow made you feel or think you're inferior. And so no one pointed that out, that in that speak, it made you feel, like less than. So, so to address that question, how do you do that? Is, first of all, you got to point out when you see, no matter how small it is. It's kind of like, I think it's so interesting. We have a law against, sexual harassment, but we never made a law about racial harassment or that sort of stuff. But yet we needed to point out when you hear these subtle digs, that they're really meant to put you down. But first of all, you have to be aware. Yeah. I admit that I hadn't been aware for a while, but you have to be aware that that's what's happening. When somebody says something about, I remember someone told me in my practice, you're okay, but it's those people. And that was so insulting. But that person really thought they were not being racist. Crazy.
The other thing too, Mel, is a lot of these racist practices are embedded in the policies, that these organizations have and the corporations. And although they may have a clause in their hiring policies that, oh, there's no discrimination, it still happens, right? And so, like you said, when you see something, say something, but it has to be people with power that are taking action, not just saying something. They have to do, you see something, say something, and do something, right?
Absolutely. And exactly. That's full circle. That's closing that loop,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And a lot of times we will complain amongst one another, but we won't take it, you know, but we don't want to seem like we're being that angry Black person, or and it goes back to fatigue, you know. It says, you know, every time you turn around, somebody's talking about race this, and, you know, or you're racist, or you're that, and people feel like if they use that somehow, you know, they're tired of hearing that, you know. And so I think a lot of whites have problems with it because they say, well, everything's got to be race related. And you know what? It is. It really is. There is, you know, we could say, like I said, in my practice, I've seen this for a lot of times. It's like, yeah, they say, you know, when somebody says that, well, they don't see color, I'm a little concerned about them, you know, because that tells me then they don't see me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then they don't see what we deal with. And when I talk with Black families, or I have an individual I work with who's Black, you know, they don't recognize the verbiage that sometimes is being used is racist, because a lot of how we say things
Mm-hmm.
is embedded in, and also in our language. So yeah, so I guess maybe what I'm saying is that there's like I said, it's not just, once again, educating people. It's not just, individuals having to stand up. It's being able to recognize it when you're being discriminated against, or when your system is oppressing you, and you have to vocalize it. When people are saying Black Lives Matter, you saw what happened with that terminology. Black Lives Matter, all of a sudden you had white people saying all lives matter, which had nothing to do with that. You know, it was a statement, much like anything else. It was a statement of fact, not a, but they politicized it, and you heard people apologizing for it, and, you know, you had Black people saying, well, you know, of course all lives matter, not understanding, or better yet, looking at some of the people that were killed and saying, well, maybe they must have done something bad, because why would they be killed? So, and this is something that we deal with as social workers, you know, which the field predominantly is white. So,
Well, you know, Mel, that it makes me think about white fragility, right? So you say Black Lives Matter, and then they say all lives matter. And it's because we've been so okay with protecting people's feelings and their emotions in reference to their racism and their oppressive ways. And so it's time to make people uncomfortable, right? And talk about these things, and like you said, call it out.
yeah, and that's it. Making them, and it's not, you know, yeah, making them uncomfortable and being okay with making them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And as a social worker, you know, I worked in the prison, and I don't know how many times, well, I don't know how many times I've been called nigger and that sort of stuff. And, you know, and as if that was going to hurt my feelings, but I've been immune to that. But it still pisses me off. And as a professional, I'm supposed to be able, as a Black person, be able to, you know, handle that. Well, I could tell you, they don't pay me enough to be with that, to be okay with that. You know, um, there are, I think, since we are Black social workers and stuff like that, and we're in this field, you know, my question, that I had talked with y'all about yesterday, or mentioned is, how much as a Black social worker are we guilty of promoting, the institutional racism, or, cultural, or how much are we contributing to the negative cultural stereotype of the people that we are supposed to be serving? Do
I
you
think a
understand the
lot of that
question?
is the
Maybe.
buy-in too. We are buying into, because of the job itself, we are buying into some of their own biases against our own. And I think that can be the problem as well, the buy-in, because we never know each person's situation as they come in to get a job. Sometimes this could be their first employment. And when you come in, you don't want to make waves. You don't want, as you had said earlier, that, these jobs, letting people know you hear something, say something. And you said, how can we let people know? We don't know their economic background as well. So sometimes they get tied into a situation that is letting them be like, oh, wow, I don't like it, but, I got to take care of these student loan bills, or I got to provide for my family. And that's how sometimes we ignore those slights. It's not taking anything away. It's not as though they're not aware. I just think sometimes we buy into it to have a safe space for right now to get to the next place. We may talk about it like you said, talking about it amongst ourselves and not take it farther, but sometimes that could be a way of survival as well. We can't discount survival.
No.
Point.
But I
Yeah,
think
no.
that, correct me if I'm wrong, but living in survival is going to bring you into fatigue, right?
It does. At one point or another, someone has to make up their mind in which direction that they're going to go. But that's up to them when that time is up for them, because each person has their own level. Depends on, okay, this job is not for me, I'm going to move on to something else. But it could just be the same thing when you move to another position. The situation could be just the same.
Mm-hmm.
Still have the institutionalized racism and those slights and everything else. I've worked a lot of different jobs. Well, two main jobs. Most of my jobs has been federal. And, you see a lot, and then it's okay. All right. When it's retirement, all I need is 20 years. Okay, 20 years. I'm ready to walk out the door. And I think that is, you try to weigh out the benefits, okay, if I leave now, how is this going to impact my future?
Yeah.
So we can't discount it. We know it's there. We live it, we get tired. And that's the part of, you have to make some decisions. My self-care, how I'm going to work this out, where I'm going to, those type of things. And, sometimes getting back into the core family and listening, okay, this is what's going on. How can I work this through? Having allies in your department.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because you need those allies, because you still can't negate the fact that you may not have the power to change anything, right? So like
Right.
it kind of goes full circle, like you were saying, they're afraid that, I'll lose my job, or, what they'll slander my name, if I speak up, if I stand up for myself, or little old me, I just can't, I can't do anything. So it kind of goes right back around to it. And then Calico, you had mentioned, does it push you into Black fatigue by ignoring or silencing yourself? And I would have to disagree. I feel like we're already in Black fatigue. It may enhance it even more, but I think that we're already there. We live it every day.
You're right. It's kind of like depression, and I agree with you 100%. What both of you said. It's the only reason that we can label Black fatigue is because we do it every day. And so someone has put a label on it, but it's been around since slavery, in terms of carrying the burden as a Black person. And I think that once again, where I coming from is, as professionals, do we recognize that? A long time ago, they had a book about Black rage, and everybody looked at it and said, oh, wow, Black people get angry? Whoa, this is a revolutionary thing. And what we've been trying to tell them, we've been angry for a long time. Just because we don't act on it, like you said, we have to do survive, we still have to eat and stuff like that. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But being able to recognize it when that person walks into your office, being able to recognize the Black experience when you are interacting or being a therapist, that's where it's really important. That's where the title Black Fatigue is very important in terms of what we do. We have to recognize that, because we're so close to the forest, we really can't see the trees. And it's up to us therapists who have to say, okay, I recognize this for what it is, and that is that, in that culture, our experience is very different. I used to have the adage that, I was thinking that can only Black people work with Black people? And we know that's not true, because you don't have to play the game in order to know the score, but you got to know what the score is. And that's why, this is very important. What we're doing here is because it helps people become aware. When people are talking and even our colleagues, who are well-meaning, may miss the nuances. And that's what I think is really important, is that our job is not just to educate, our clients, but also it's important to educate yourself and see, where are you coming? What are you doing in terms of how are you becoming aware of what's going on? There are a lot of books out there that are talking about the Black experience. And it is important for us to know what that is if we're going to treat, the minorities. And that's why I think, and Mary, I know you had a different experience, but, what I see with a lot of, Blacks, a lot of them still are leery about going in and getting therapy. They still, if they have that stigma that they're mentally ill, that even puts them even worse on their wrong on that level. So,
But I think that stereo comes from how social workers are portrayed, or anybody in the health field, that stereotype. And I think with social worker in itself, they need a new PR firm or something to kind of change and enlighten the society of what social workers do. So until all health professionals get a new PR firm and update and navigate and try to educate the masses that, hey, we are here. We're not here to harm. We are here to assist.
Yeah, because that goes back into the history of social work.
Right.
When social work first began, the emphasis was on, removing the Black male from the family, removing the Black woman from the workforce and putting her back in the home with her children. And then you have the economic impact of that. And so it goes all the way back to the foundation of the social work profession. And then here we are today, modern day society, where when you say, hey, you introduce yourself as, hey, I'm the social worker, people automatically think, oh, you take kids, it's child welfare is the highlight, right? They don't see the therapist, they don't see the addiction counselor, they don't see the advocate, the policy person, the person that's going to change legislation. They don't see that side of social work. So I think, like you said, it's so important to highlight the many, many hats that we wear, because we do it all.
Right.
Yes, we
Well,
do.
that's the reason why I said new PR. We need to get a better public relation out there to let people know all the many hats that we do wear. So
Yeah. That's the many sides of social work. Webinar series. Guys, we have another question. Do you think the social work field can realistically claim cultural competency in practice if the majority of the history and roots of the field, interventions, and other standards were developed in a Eurocentric approach?
In the simplest terms, we got to change the narrative. That's the best way I can answer that. We have to change the narrative.
I agree with that. I mean, it is about putting one foot in front of the other. And it is about, a better PR. But I think, but you're talking about the social work field, and that we have so much diversity in this field and stuff like that. That's a
That's a
major
deep
undertaking.
question.
What's that?
That question is very deep. I mean, we could go there, but it'll take all night to unpack that.
right.
That's right. We don't have that. Exactly.
Speaking of that, we were aware this might get a little bit long when we were talking to each other yesterday, and I don't want to push us ahead too far. And I also want to say that we can regroup and get back together another time for sure. I would love that. But I also do want to talk about the health disparities involved, not just because it's our next slide, but also because I see a lot of that going on. And I know I mentioned to you guys yesterday that I have some friends who were concerned in Ohio about facilities being opened and labeled as like minority facilities, Black facilities for getting COVID vaccines. And I just wondered if you guys could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No.
Well,
No, Mary, because I'm always pushing you ahead. So go do it.
No. Well, what was happening with Brittany had said it best yesterday in reference to giving people a safe zone in which to be able to go to places and see people either, in a professional setting that looks like them. And so that they can have a buy-in of being comfortable. I think that has a lot to do with it because as Mel, you had said yesterday that a lot of times it goes back to, Blacks being experimented on and, those things. So giving people a safe place to be able to see maybe other people like themselves, that they can have a place to, ask questions and that somebody really take the time, maybe answer those questions or answer their concerns. Because a lot of times when Black people go to the doctor, their concerns is overlooked. They're, minimized and all of that. So that's on another slide in there as well. But I just wanted to, that's my spiel. Yeah.
Yes. And you hit all the points that I could have even touched on. So I guess we can move forward with that.
Well, I like to say one thing. It's not, once again, I think, because I also have worked as a social worker in a medical facility. I've worked in different areas. But what bothers me the most about what you asked, Calico, not you, but I mean, what that is that that there was even a question about having a Black, place where they get shots, or that sort of stuff. And that person, I don't know if the person was concerned or it's just surprised.
No, I think it was a concern because of them feeling like they were making Black people go somewhere else.
Mm.
Yeah, and was that person white?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. See, what's totally missing about that whole thing is that concern to make them go to, you know, the bigger picture is at least they have a place where they can get these shots, because we're dying, and so I'm glad, whether it's white or black, it's unfortunate that we have to think that way, but uh, I if I didn't know you, then I would have questioned your friend a little bit closer as to what really, you know, what's the real message up under that? Is it, are they, I'm not trusting that, or, that person is concerned about how Black people feel.
Yeah,
because
that's what I'm wondering. I'm sorry, Brittany. I'm wondering with that, is that a missing piece as well, with white privilege and everything else that some white people don't understand or acknowledge or even want to look at, that side of thinking, either somebody's doing something bad to you, or for some reason you're getting a special privilege, but not looking at the fact of, okay, what is your experience? And I just don't even, I think that goes back to the education. I don't think white people are educated. I think that has to come from themselves, from within, to want to find out. I don't think it's really taught in our history classes well. And I just think that there has been so much of being quiet around the topic, that I
yes.
don't think a lot of people have a lot of knowledge.
Well, it's not taught in the history books either, but it's not taught in social work either. That is something, and I've been out of school for a minute. I don't remember having these discussions about the differences of how Black people are discriminated against, or our health disparity, and how this is toxic to us. Now, it may be in trauma informed, but I did trauma informed too, and I don't remember this being a piece of it. So it has to go back to even that, even in the colleges, as doctors and other professions as well. This need to be taught on every level.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of diversity training. I see them reaching out and doing diversity, but it's separate from the core curriculum, or in some places. And what I mean by core is just, it shouldn't be just taught in the college. We're being, our institutional, in our socialization in schools. There are schools that still don't accept or even talk about the contribution that Blacks have made, or people of color have made, to the building of the United States. So when you talk about education, we're talking about, well, like Ms. Jenkins was saying, we do have to change the script a little bit, because there, you look at our books and we're still talking about the, we're still talking, we're still being excluded,
You can
if
say
you
it,
will.
Mel. It's okay. You can say it. I mean, we still telling our kids that Christopher Columbus discovered the United States, and
Yeah.
so it has to change at the upper levels first in the policies. It has to be written in the policies, and we as social workers can do that. But when Mary was talking, it made me think just about even the everyday person, the person that may not be educated, right? Even if they did know about the health disparities that Black people face, they have to be willing to do something about it, and not so much take it as a gut punch when we are given a privilege that they are not given. That goes right back to white fragility.
Well, like Calico was saying too, is that where it really goes at is, what kind of social worker do you want to be? Because when I had I wasn't just a clinical social worker. I graduated out of the School of Integrated Practice, which is more being client centered, and also radical. I was a radical wasn't a radical social worker. I was a radical sociologist. It was my undergraduate, and studied on, Saul Alinsky, and also saw, walking down the street and watching a lot of the changes and stuff like that. And that's what got me into being a social worker, because I wanted to be an agent of change. I mean, I really wanted to do that. And then all of a sudden, what Mary was talking about, then I realized, geez, I got to eat. And that scared me, and so I'll own it, So, well, there are, there's, yeah, I wanted to eat, and I wanted to, and so I lost my bearing, I lost my direction in the various agencies that I was in, because I was a male, I was a Black male, and, um, and I worked with a bunch of white females who, to some degree, were afraid of the Black man, and so, so that was one, something I had to overcome, you know, you know, so not to make, my white counterparts feel comfortable with me, I had to dial back, a lot of my, prejudice until, or I had to dial back who I was. And in doing that, I kind of lost myself in that process. But I'm woke now.
Well, it does, what is it's just a reality of life, and people can't expect Black social workers to continue to carry on the fight for everybody. Everybody has to take up the mantle themselves and be a part of this change. Then I think we all have been woke for a long time. It's just that nobody was listening.
Yes.
Now is the time of change where people are starting to engage and want to know, or at least pretend they want to know.
I think sometimes, I do feel sometimes it's really genuine for those people who will take the time and invest trying to wanting to understand. But it's a personal thing. Like for me, like I said, when I heard, Ms. Jenkins saying that, and you also spending some time preparing for this by looking up, and going on and seeing all these things. Whenever I do that, I just get pissed. And so I didn't think I wanted to enter into this, in the frame of mind of being angry. But I admire the fact is that you all read and you're doing this. And Ms. Jenkins saying, when she sees a book, she says, that's something I really want to read. And I'm thinking that was something I lived, but I could learn to I can do more though. I can do more, and I will do more.
I want
to. I'm sorry. Well, I think all of us have lived various different experiences. Like Ms. Jenkins said that, she's born in the South, so was I, but I did a different lifestyle, went into the military and then out of the military. And, these different things, experience in life, very different from the United States. It's very different in engaging into that culture and then having it dial back once I got back. And just adjusting. So I get it. We all, we are culture within a culture itself. Yeah. So yeah.
And one more thing, Mel, just to say, it's okay for us to not be okay, right? And I'm coming from a therapeutic perspective, but just from a Black perspective, it is okay for Black people to say, hey, I am not okay. I'm not okay with this. And in reading and studying and researching for this very moment today, there was some time where I had to turn it off, right? I had to put the books down. I had to talk to my therapist and say, hey, look, I'm overwhelmed by this. And, I've experienced this. I've seen other kids in my high school classes with the Confederate flag on their shirts, and that's okay. But I couldn't wear a head covering, that represented my culture, right? So it's okay for us to not be okay.
Agreed. I also think when you guys were talking about what can we do as social workers and how change might need to happen with social work and that question that we were asked, my mind goes to narrative therapy and let people tell their story and then let them be the expert of that story. And that's what I enjoy about each of you and why I asked you to participate, because you all are more than willing to tell your story and share from your hearts and your experience. And it helps us learn, and it helps us develop more empathy. And it also helps us want to come beside you and join forces and say, enough is enough.
I like to say, so I have to go here shortly. One of the things that I think we have to be the, the change agent. You ask, where does the change come from? We are in the positions in which we can make a change, and not by, pathologizing the people that we work with, by not saying, oh, well, poor you come from because that doesn't help anybody. And we sometimes, give up mixed messages, poor you, but you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and that's just bullshit. So anyway, I think that you have to, certain, and not all social workers are, change agents. I mean, let's just face it, there's some people, as Mary was pointing out, can make changes in other areas without burning down or pulling down a statue or that sort of stuff. But we have to keep in mind what we don't want to do is taking the adage from the medical. What we don't want to do is you do no harm. We don't want to do, what we want to do is empower people. And that's where I think what I like, empowering people, not normalizing, racist or ignorant stuff. And like you said, we can do this another time, unpack some of this more, but I have another group I have to go in and say the same thing to them. So, but I would like to invite y'all to Unitix, Not Politics, because, as Vargas is going to be on that as well. But this is where we also unload this sort of stuff and talk about these changes. So remember that Unitix, Not Politics.
I also want to say that I lately posted something on Facebook that talked about when you're thinking about the traumas that you've endured and the things you've gone through and the things your family's gone through, don't forget the resilience that has been shown.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
You too. All right. I think we can wrap it up with questions, and we will definitely have to continue this conversation. And Unitix, Not Politics will be happening this Saturday, if anybody's interested in that too. Do we want to just open it up for some questions and some conversation?
Sure.
Mr. Greer, thank you for being here. We only have a few more minutes because we were supposed to go an hour. This is great. Thank you.
All right. Carry on, and thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. All right. Does anyone have questions in the chat if you want to write anything?
Well, it looks like you have some people in the chat. I don't know if they said anything.
So the comments I see are the roots still have to be nourished by water. And that was from earlier when we were talking about the tree.
Okay.
And then education is key, but by precept and example, it's a continuous process. That came in about 518, 553. While we have the nation's attention, we need to make people aware so they too can be woke. Great discussion. And another person said, good job, guys. And somebody's questioning what Unitix is. It's another panel discussion.
Well, I think Unitix, isn't that about union, bringing everybody together?
Yes.
So that's all it means.
You can find it if you Google Unitix, Not Politics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, thank you. You're welcome. Thank everybody. Thank you, ladies, for the conversation and for sharing and your insights. I hope you'll both come back again. And thank you, everybody who did join us this evening. We appreciate you coming to the first in our webinar series. We have a lot more to talk about.
It's so much more. It's so
It's
deep.
so much more to this.
Yeah, this was definitely surface level, but we'll get there.
Sounds like a plan for the future. All right, well, shall I end this session?
Yeah, thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think I should stop the recording.